everyone, it's Deb from Locked Up with History in the National Crime and Justice Museum here at the Geelong Gaol. Today I want to talk about why I'm doing the show in her words and why these stories matter. And realistically, it comes back to women's place in history. We look at our social history today. Even today, we still have, pay disparities between men and women, even though they're doing the same jobs. We have, women that sort of kept down through domestic violence that still is very prevalent today. And I find domestic violence is an interesting one because we find that feels like it's a newer problem, but it's actually not. It actually goes back further than Australia existed. So for these reasons, it's really important that we actually look at some of these women's stories and look at how history treated them and what was in place and the laws that were in place and why they tried to obliterate some of these women from even being recognised in their own right. Why some women were put in positions where they felt that they had no other choice than to murder their husbands to get away from the abuse. And that's not to say that every one of these 25 women were innocent. Most definitely not. There's some of them that very definitely were guilty. But there's also some of them that, given different circumstances, I don't think would have ended up in a position where they were fighting for their lives. And then you add into that things like some of the laws that are in place, like we have, there was a colonial law that allowed men to correct their wives rather than, as long as they didn't do any permanent damage, it was okay if they corrected their wives or chastised their wives in particular ways. That seems absolutely horrendous to us now. But it's also important with history that we look at these in the circumstances of what they had, because that's their reality. That was the reality that they were living in. And it's important to keep that in mind when we are going through these stories and when we're looking at these stories, to make sure that we are looking at them within the realms of their own lifetimes. So as you can tell, it's something I'm fairly passionate about, and that's why I've sort of started to do this. These women have become, although some of them are very frustrating to research because there's not a lot of clues, but I've also become quite engaged with their stories and how they lived and what their circumstances were. Can I answer all the questions? No. Because they simply don't exist. And there's some places that I literally cannot find, or I haven't had the time to find that. But if this interests you at all, please come along to the shows. I would love to chat with you more. Thanks. Bye.